Hey everyone, ready to jump into a topic that's super important for heart health. We're doing a deep dive into aortic stenosis.
It's a condition a lot of people haven't heard of, but it's definitely something worth knowing about.
Yeah, for sure, especially if you're, interested in keeping your heart in tip-top shape.
Exactly.
So let's start at the very beginning. What exactly is aortic stenosis?
Well, aortic stenosis is when the aortic valve in your heart narrows.
The aortic valve.
Yeah, it's this, you can think of it like a one-way door in your heart. It stops blood that's been pumped out from flowing back in.
Okay, I'm picturing a door. So what happens when it narrows?
Imagine trying to squeeze like a garden hose through a tiny little pinhole. That's kind of what's happening with blood flow when the valve narrows.
So it gets all restricted?
Yeah, it restricts the blood flow, making the heart work way harder.
Oh, I see. So the heart's got to pump extra hard just to get the blood through.
Exactly. It's like your heart's constantly running uphill.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So what causes this narrowing? Is it just like a normal part of aging?
Well, age is definitely a factor.
Okay.
As we get older, calcium can build up on the valve.
Oh, like the same kind of calcium that's in our bones?
Yeah, similar. And that buildup makes the valve stiff and less flexible. But there are other things that can cause it too.
Like what?
Some people are actually born with something called a bicuspid aortic valve.
A bicuspid?
Yeah, it means instead of having 3 flaps, their valve only has 2,
Huh.
which can make it more likely to narrow.
Oh, wow. So some people are just kind of predisposed to it.
Exactly. And then sometimes things like rheumatic fever can damage the valve and lead to stenosis.
Rheumatic fever.
It's a complication from untreated strep throat.
Oh, right. So it sounds like a lot of things can contribute to it. But here's the thing. You mentioned earlier that it could be silent for a long time.
Right.
So how do we even know if we have it? What are the signs we should be looking out for?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. A lot of people don't have any symptoms until it's pretty advanced.
Oh no, that's scary.
It is, which is why it's so important to go to the doctor for regular checkups,
Even if you feel fine.
Even if you feel fine. Because a doctor can sometimes hear a heart murmur just by listening with a stethoscope.
Really? Just from listening?
Yeah, which can be an early clue that something's up.
Wow. So it's really about being proactive with your health.
Exactly. And keep in mind that symptoms usually only show up when you're being physically active.
Okay, so you might not notice anything just going about your day.
Right. But then when you try to exercise, you might start to feel something's off.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what kind of red flags should we be looking out for?
Well, one of the most common ones is breathlessness.
Like getting out of breath easily.
Yeah, especially during exercise. If your heart's struggling to pump blood efficiently, your body might not be getting enough oxygen.
Oh, that makes sense. So if you're working out and you get winded super easily, that's a sign to get checked out.
Definitely. Another one is chest pain, especially the kind called angina.
Angina, that sounds serious.
It can feel like a tightness or pressure in your chest.
So if you're getting chest pain during a workout, that's a big red flag.
Absolutely. And then another thing to watch out for is fainting.
Fainting? Really?
Yeah, that could mean your brain isn't getting enough blood flow.
Wow. So these symptoms can be pretty subtle. It's really important to pay attention to what your body's telling you.
You got it. And if you do experience any of those things, your doctor's probably going to want to run some tests.
Right, to figure out what's going on.
Exactly, to see if it's aortic stenosis and how bad it is.
Okay, so let's talk about those tests. How is aortic stenosis actually diagnosed?
Well, the main test is an echocardiogram.
Echocardiogram. That sounds intense.
It's actually pretty simple. They use sound waves to take pictures of your heart.
Oh, so it's kind of like an ultrasound for your heart.
Exactly. It's painless, and it gives doctors a really clear picture of the aortic valve and how it's working.
I see. So they can actually see the valve.
Yep. Another common test is a CT scan. But not just any CT scan. This one is specifically for aortic calcium scoring.
Calcium scoring?
Yeah, it measures how much calcium has built up on the valve.
So the more calcium, the worse the stenosis.
Generally speaking, yes.
Got it. Are there any other tests they might do?
Sometimes a doctor might recommend something called a transesophageal echocardiography.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It's also called a TOE for short.
TOE, okay.
It gives an even closer look at the valve leaflets and how they're moving.
That sounds pretty high-tech.
It is. It's a little more invasive than an echocardiogram, but it gives incredibly detailed information.
Okay, so they have all these different ways to really see what's happening. And you mentioned that they also want to figure out the severity, right? Like how bad the stenosis is.
Exactly.
Well, how do they do that?
Besides the imaging tests, they look at a bunch of different health metrics. These metrics tell us how much your heart is being affected, and that helps guide decisions about treatment.
Okay, so what are these key health metrics that everyone with aortic stenosis should know about?
One of the big ones is called BNP, or B-type natriuretic peptide.
BNP, okay.
It's a protein that your heart releases when it's working too hard.
So like a distress signal.
Exactly. The more strain on your heart, the higher your BNP levels will be.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. Are there other important ones?
Yep. Another one is called transaortic velocity. It basically measures how fast the blood is flowing through the narrowed valve.
Oh, so they can actually see the speed of the blood.
Yep. And the faster the blood's moving, the more severe the stenosis is likely to be.
That makes sense. Yeah. Anything else?
One more important metric is the mean pressure gradient. This one measures the pressure difference between the left ventricle of your heart and the aorta.
So a higher gradient means the heart has to work harder.
Exactly.
So all these metrics are like pieces of a puzzle that help doctors figure out what's going on with your heart.
You got it. And by keeping track of these metrics over time, doctors can see if things are getting worse and make informed decisions about what to do.
This is so interesting. It's amazing how they can use these tools and measurements to get such a detailed understanding.
It really is. And the more you know about these metrics, the better you can talk to your doctor about your own heart health.
That's a great point. Even if you're not having any symptoms, it's good to be aware of these things and discuss them with your doctor, especially as you get older.
Absolutely.
This has been incredibly helpful. We've covered a lot today, what aortic stenosis is, how it shows up, and how it's diagnosed. And we've even delved into those key health metrics that everyone should be aware of. But I think this is really just the beginning, right?
You're right. There's still so much more to explore.
For sure. All right, so we're back and ready to dig a little deeper into aortic stenosis. Last time we talked about all those tests and measurements.
Right.
But now I'm kind of wondering what happens when those health metrics start showing that something's wrong. Like, when do you actually need to intervene?
That's a great question, and it's not always a simple answer, you know?
Oh, so it's not like there's a specific number where it's like, okay, you hit this point, you need surgery.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
It really depends on the individual patient.
Oh, so how do doctors decide?
Well, they look at a lot of things, like how severe the stenosis is, obviously.
Right.
But also how it's affecting the person's life.
So someone could have a pretty narrowed valve, but if they're feeling fine, maybe they don't need to rush into anything.
Exactly. If they're not having any symptoms and their other health metrics are good, then sometimes the best approach is to just watch and wait.
Okay, so it's really personalized.
Very much so. But on the other hand, if someone is having a lot of problems, you know,
Yeah.
like they can't breathe well, they're getting chest pain, or even fainting, especially if it's happening during normal activities,
Right.
then intervening sooner might be really important to help them feel better and prevent things from getting worse.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's all about finding that balance between like watching and waiting and actually taking action.
Exactly.
So besides those symptoms and the severity, are there other things doctors consider?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The patient's age, their overall health, any other medical conditions they have, all those things play a role.
Got it. So, for example, a younger person who's starting to have symptoms might be more likely to have an intervention sooner.
That's a good example because they have more active years ahead of them.
Right, right. So it's
Sure.
a really individualized approach.
It is. So now when it comes to interventions themselves, there are kind of two main categories: surgical aortic valve replacement, or SAVR,
Okay.
and transcatheter aortic valve implantation, which is called TVI.
Whoa, those sound pretty intense.
Yeah, they're both pretty amazing procedures, actually. So let's break them down a little bit. First, SAVR. That's basically open heart surgery.
Open heart surgery, wow.
Yeah, it's been the standard treatment for aortic stenosis for a long time.
So how does that work?
The surgeon opens up the chest, removes the narrowed valve, and puts in a new one.
And they just take out the old valve and pop in a new one.
Pretty much. The new valve can be made from mechanical parts or from animal tissue.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, and it's a very effective procedure.
But open heart surgery sounds like a big deal.
It is a major surgery. It takes longer to recover from than TVI, but it's been done for many years, and the new valves last a long time.
Okay, so it's tried and true, but it comes with a longer recovery.
Right. Now, the other option, TVI, is a newer technique.
Okay.
It's minimally invasive. So instead of opening up the chest, they insert a new valve through a catheter.
A catheter.
It's like a thin tube. They usually thread it through an artery in the groin.
Oh, wow. So that's much less invasive than open heart surgery.
Exactly. And the recovery time is generally a lot shorter with TAVI, which can be a big advantage for some patients.
Right, I can imagine. But are there any downsides?
Well, one of the things they look at with TAVI is the durability of the valve, how long it will last.
Oh, okay.
The technology is getting better all the time, but there's still some uncertainty about the long-term durability compared to the valves used in SAVR.
So they have to weigh that when they're making the decision.
Yeah.
Are there any other risks with either procedure?
Well, with any heart procedure, there are some risks, right? Like bleeding, infection, things like that.
Right.
And with TAVI, there's a slight chance of something called paravalvular leak.
Paravalvular leak. What's that?
It's when some blood leaks around the implanted valve.
Oh, I see.
But the doctors take a lot of steps to try and prevent that, and the technology keeps getting better.
So both SAVR and TAVI have their own advantages and disadvantages.
Right.
How do doctors choose which one is right for a patient?
It's really a team effort, you know. The doctor and the patient work together to make the best decision.
I see.
They look at the patient's age, their health, how their heart is structured, what the patient wants.
Yeah.
Lots of things. Sometimes SAVR is the clear choice. Other times it's TVI. The most important thing is that the doctor and patient talk openly and honestly so they can come up with the best plan.
That makes sense. It sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all approach here.
Nope, not at all.
It's amazing how medicine has come so far.
It is pretty cool, and the field is always moving forward.
That's great to hear.
New treatments and new ways of doing things are being developed all the time.
So there's a lot of hope for the future.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of hope.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm learning so much.
It's great to see you so interested.
We've talked about the different ways doctors intervene to help manage aortic stenosis, weighed the pros and cons, and discussed how these decisions are tailored to each individual. But we're not done yet, are we?
Not even close. There's still so much to talk about. We haven't even touched on what the future holds for aortic stenosis management.
Ooh, like new diagnostic tools and treatments.
Exactly. Things are changing all the time.
Welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our aortic stenosis deep dive. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We've gone from understanding the basics to those key interventions like SAVR and TAVI.
Right.
But now, I gotta say, I'm really excited to look ahead. Like, what's on the horizon for diagnosing and treating this?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be in this field, for sure. Things are constantly evolving.
So let's start with imaging. We talked about echocardiograms and CT scans.
Mm-hmm.
But what's next? What's getting researchers all fired up?
Well, we're moving from standard definition to high definition, but for the heart.
Oh, wow.
We have these amazing technologies like 4D flow MRI and speckle tracking echocardiography.
Those sound so futuristic.
They are pretty amazing. They give us this incredibly detailed look at how blood flows through the heart.
So it's not just a still image anymore.
Right. It's a moving picture. We can see the blood flowing through the chambers, through the valves, how the heart muscle is responding.
Wow, that's like X-ray vision for the heart.
It kind of is. We can see subtle changes in blood flow, tiny leaks, even how the heart muscle is contracting, all in real time.
That's incredible. So does that mean we can detect stenosis even earlier?
Exactly. We can potentially see things before symptoms even develop and make better decisions about when to intervene.
That's amazing. Okay, so what about beyond imaging? You mentioned biomarkers earlier. Anything new there?
Absolutely. We talked about BNP, that protein that's like a distress signal from the heart.
Yeah.
Well, researchers are discovering a bunch of other biomarkers that could be even more specific for aortic stenosis.
Oh, wow. So what kind of things could these new markers tell us?
They might be able to tell us how fast the condition is progressing or if someone's at higher risk for complications.
So it's like having a crystal ball, but for your heart health.
Yeah. The more we understand about these biomarkers, the more we can personalize treatments and maybe even prevent those complications.
Okay, this is all super exciting. But what about entirely new treatments? Anything revolutionary on the horizon?
There are some really incredible possibilities.
Like what?
One area is gene editing.
Gene editing?
Yeah, imagine being able to actually correct the genes that make someone more likely to get aortic stenosis.
Wow, that would be a total game changer.
Right. It's still early days, but the potential is huge.
What about stem cell therapy? I've heard that's being used for other things.
Yeah, stem cell therapy for heart conditions is super exciting. They're looking into using stem cells to actually repair or regenerate damaged heart valves.
So instead of replacing the valve, you could just fix the one you have.
Exactly. It's still being researched, but it could be a game changer.
Wow, it's mind-blowing to think about what the future might hold.
I know, right? It feels like we're on the edge of some really big breakthroughs. And what's so exciting is that all this research is ultimately about helping people live longer, healthier lives.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. We've learned so much about aortic stenosis, from the basics to the cutting edge.
It's been great talking about it with you.
Thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
You're very welcome.
And to all our listeners, we hope this deep dive has been helpful. Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to your health. Thanks for joining us.